I'm joined now in the studio by Stuart Murphy, the former controller of BBC Three, and by Jeff Randall, late of this parish, currently of the Daily Telegraph. Is this enough to secure the future of the BBC, these changes?
Well, they're clearly fairly radical changes. I think one of the main things the BBC needs to do is try and acknowledge how audiences have changed and what their expectations are. I think now when major brands go onto TV like The Apprentice or Strictly Come Dancing, audiences' expectations are not what they used to be, and they want to have what people call a kind of deeper interaction with that programme. So they want a website, sometimes a podcast, they want Turnover Now for a kind of behind-the-scenes show, which naturally means making fewer shows and fewer brands, I guess.
Does this look like a strategic judgment to you?
It doesn't really, Jeremy. I think the problem for the BBC is that it's lost its priorities. You know, I was astonished to learn that from a £3 billion budget, as you mentioned, more than £3 billion, flagship shows, the pride of the BBC, like the Today programme, its entire annual budget is £5 million. Newsnight, this very show, the best of the BBC, £8 million. And yet these shows are having to shave the parmesan. It's crazy. It's like you going home and saying, Mrs. Paxman, we're going bust. And she said, OK, well, I'll stop buying tea bags. It doesn't matter. Newsnight is only 0.3% of the BBC's budget.
We mustn't get into special pleading about Newsnight because this affects all sorts of programmes.
Well, OK, let's talk about the Today programme.
Your point is that it's being salami sliced in the cliché everywhere instead of being great judgments made about things we can do with that.
Precisely so. I think this required some really big, bold judgments from management, not asking every department to lose a little bit. Forget Newsnight. Let's look at the Today programme, £5 million annual budget. That's less than the BBC pays Jonathan Ross in 1 year. And that's not to be nasty to Jonathan Ross, but it puts into perspective the kind of pressures that are on news.
But it's really difficult making those comparisons, isn't it? I mean, when you look at the talent cost of Jonathan Ross, I think licence fee payers expect, the main thing is licence fee payers expect there to be maximum value from the licence fee. Licence fee payers also won't come to the BBC unless the BBC has major talent they love. And it's a balancing act. I mean, you know, you need to pay big stars, big wages, or they won't be at the BBC.
The key question here was raised in Liz McKean's film is, does the BBC, funded by this very odd mechanism, have any place at all in the digital age? Does it?
Of course it does. I mean, you look at what the next generation of licence fee payers want, i.e. people under 35, and previously they used to leave the BBC at kind of the age of 15, go to commercial channels and come back to the BBC when they were kind of 35 and had kids again, and the kids were watching the BBC. Now, increasingly, we're finding that people are leaving the BBC at 15 and not coming back in the numbers they should do. And it's crazy, I think, to have a younger generation of licence fee payers who pay their licence fee being underserved by the BBC. So this isn't, I don't think, about the BBC losing their priorities. It's surely about the BBC reprioritising and saying we need to be fit for purpose for a digital age, I think.
OK, so I think that's coded talk for BBC Three is a good idea.
Well, I think the BBC's trying to do too much for a start. Tell me the last time that the BBC parked its tanks somewhere and then withdrew them. Once it's moved into an area, it thinks that is it. BBC Three, if you want me to be nasty to BBC Three, it's quite easy. You didn't mention, I'm afraid, Titty Titty Bang Bang, or indeed F Off, I'm a Hairy Woman.
Sorry, I missed those seminal works.
Exactly. These are distinctive titles, but they're not distinctive programming. BBC Three costs £93 million a year. If you stopped 1,000 people in the street and said, would you like some more Today programme for £5 million or less BBC Three for £93 million, I'm pretty sure I know the answer. The BBC has lost its priorities.
That's a really specific point. I wonder how old that person would be that you would ask. If you asked someone under 35, you'd get a very clear answer that BBC Three gets 12 million people watching it a week. A third of 16 to 35-year-olds watch it every single week. And the very fact, in a sense, that you, as a early, late 40-year-old, early 50-year-old, might not like BBC Three is, in a sense, neither here nor there. You probably don't like Radio 1. Equally, there's probably lots of shows aimed at people in your audience, in your age group, that I'm not interested in. The purpose of the BBC is to serve all audiences, not all the time, of course.
But the question is, can that be done by this universal licence fee over an ever-multiplying number of outlets?
Jeremy, the purpose of the BBC is not to put on freak shows. You talk about 12 million viewers a week for BBC Three. The Today programme, at the peak of its listenership each morning, gets about 2 million. So I reckon the Today programme gets about 12 million listeners a week. So that's on a par with BBC Three, and it's working on a fraction of the budget. It's nothing to do with age. If you want the BBC to be high quality, I don't think you need to offer soft porn.
But who are you to judge whether BBC Three is or isn't high quality? Those programme titles have to compete in a really competitive digital environment where younger audiences are far more kind of promiscuous in terms of what they watch on TV channels. I don't defend the whatever F off I'm a hairy woman, but I commissioned Titty Bang Bang. It's with brand new comedians. It's a very, very funny show. You might not like it, but actually it's not aimed at you, in fairness.
But it's about priorities and it's about
All right.
cost.
OK. Thank you both very much.